Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter number 12, verse number 11. We shall be continuing. We've been reading how Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he tried to arrange the meeting between King Pratap Rudra of Odisha of Jagannath Puri and between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The king was getting a bit anxious where we left last time, so let's continue from there. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamham vande Shri Gurum Dinitarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Bhattacharya Patri dekhi chintit haina Bhakt Gana Pash Gela Se Patri Lena. When the Bhattacharya received this letter, he became very anxious. He then took the letter and went to the devotees of the Lord. Verse number 12. Sabare Miliya Kahila Raj Vivarna Piche Se Patri Sabare Karaila Darshana. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya met with all the devotees and described the king's wishes. Then he presented the letter to all of them for inspection. Verse number 13. Patri dekhi sabar mane haila vismaya prabhu pade gaja patira eta bhakti haya. Upon reading the letter, everyone was astonished to see that King Pratap Rudra had so much devotion for the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Verse number 14. Sabe kahe prabhu tanre kabhu na milibe ami saba kahi yadi dukkha se manibe. The devotees gave their opinion and said, the Lord will never meet the king, and if we requested him to do so, the Lord would surely feel very unhappy. Verse number 15. Sarvabhauma kahe sab chala eka bar milite na kahiba raj vyavahar. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then said, we shall go once again to the Lord, but we shall not request him to meet the king. Rather, we will simply describe the good behavior of the king. Verse number 16. Eta bali sabi gela Mahaprabhura sthane kahite unmukha sabe na kahe vachane. Having thus reached a decision, they all went to the place of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Although ready to speak, they could not even utter a word. Verse 17. Prabhu kahe ki kahite sabar agamana dekhiye kahite chaha na kahe ki karana. After they arrived at Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's place, the Lord, seeing them, said, what have you all come here to say? I see that you want to say something, but you do not speak. What is the reason? Verse 18. Nityananda kahe tomai chahi nivedite na kahile rahite nari kahite bhaya chitte. Nityananda Prabhu then said, we want to tell you something. Although you cannot stay without speaking, we cannot stay without speaking, we are still very much afraid to speak. Verse 19. Yogya ayogya tomai sab chahi nivedite toma na milile raja chahi yogi haite. We want to submit before you something that may or may not be befitting. The matter is this, unless he sees you, the king of Orissa will become a mendicant. Verse number 20. Kane mudra lai muni haiba bikhari rajya bhoga nahe chitte vina gaura hari. Nityananda Prabhu continued, the king has decided to become mendicant and accept the sign of a mendicant by wearing an ivory earring. He does not want to enjoy his kingdom without seeing the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport by His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. In India, there is still a class of professional mendicants who are very much like the gypsies of the Western countries. They know some magical art and mystical processes, and their business is to beg from door to door, sometimes pleading and sometimes threatening. Such mendicants are sometimes called yogis and sometimes Kanapata yogis. The Kanapata refers to one who has put a hole in his ear to wear an earring made of ivory. Maharaj Prataprudra was so depressed by not getting to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he decided to become such a yogi. Ordinary men think that a yogi must have an ivory earring in his ear, but this is not the sign of a real yogi. Maharaj Prataprudra also thought that to become a mendicant yogi, one must wear such an earring. Verse 21. देखिबा से मुख चंद्र नयना भरिया धरिबा से पाद padma hriday tuliya. Nityananda Prabhu continued, the king also expressed his desire to see the moon-like face of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to see his eyes full satisfaction. He would like to raise the lotus feet of the Lord to his heart. Verse 22. यद्यपि शुनिया प्रभुरा कोमल है मना तथापि बाहिरे कहे निष्ठुर वचन. Hearing all these statements, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mind was certainly softened, but externally he wished to speak some harsh words. Verse 23. Toma sabar ichha e amare lena raja ke milaha ihan katakete giya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I can understand that you all desire to take me to Katak to see the king. Purpose, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is naturally the reservoir of all kindness, and as soon as he heard the statement made by the king, his heart immediately softened. Thus the Lord was ready to go see the king even at Katak. He did not even consider allowing the king to come from Katak to Jagannath Puri to see him. It is significant that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so kind that he was ready to see the king at Katak. Apparently, it was never expected that the king wanted to see the Lord at his place, but by the way of being externally harsh, the Lord indicated that if all the devotees so desired, he would go to Katak to see the king. Verse 24. Paramarth Thaku ka loke karibe nindana, loke rahu damodar karibe bhartsana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, what to speak of spiritual advancement, all the people will blaspheme me, and what to speak of all the people, Damodar would chastise me. Verse number 25. Toma sabar ajnaya ami na mili rajare, Damodar kahe yabe mili tabe tanre. I shall not meet the king at the request of all the devotees, but I shall do so if Damodar will give his permission. Purport. From the spiritual point of view, a sannyasi is strictly forbidden to see materialistic people, especially a king who is always engaged in counting pounds, shillings and pence. Indeed, the meeting between the sannyasi and a king is always considered abominable. A sannyasi is always subjected to public criticism, and a small fault on his part is taken seriously by the public. People actually expect a sannyasi to preach and not to take part in any social or political matters. If a sannyasi is subject to public criticism, his preaching will not be fruitful. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically wanted to avoid such criticism so that his preaching work would not be hampered. It so happened that while the Lord was talking to his disciple at that time, the devotee Damodar Pandit was present. This Damodar Pandit was a very faithful devotee and a staunch lover of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whenever there was anything that might touch or taint the character of the Lord, Damodar Pandit would immediately point it out, not even considering the exalted position of the Lord. It is sometimes said that the fools rush in where angels dare not, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to point out Damodar Pandit's foolishness in coming forward to criticize the Lord. This is why the Lord stated that if Damodar Pandit would give him permission, he would go to see the king. There was deep meaning in that statement. For it is a warning that Damodar should not dare criticize the Lord anymore, for it was not befitting his position as a devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was considered the guide and spiritual master of all the devotees living with him. Damodar Pandit was one of them, and the Lord rendered Damodar Pandit a special favor by warning him to avoid criticizing him any further. A devotee or a disciple should never attempt to criticize the Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. Verse 26, Damodar kahe tumi swatantra Ishwara, kartavya akartavya sab tumar gochara. Damodar immediately replied, My Lord, you are the fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since everything is known to you, you know what is permissible and what is not permissible. Verse 27. Ami kon kshudra jiva tomake vidhi diba, apni milibe tanre tahao dekhiba. I am merely an insignificant jiva, so what power do I have to give directions to you? By your own personal choice, you will meet with the king. I shall see it. Verse 28. Raja tomare sneha kare tumi sneha vasha, tanra snehe karabe tanre tomar parasha. The king is very much attached to you and you are feeling affection and love toward him. Thus I can understand that by the virtue of the king's affection for you, you will touch him. Verse 29. Yadyapi Ishwar tumi param swatantra, tathapi swabhave hao prema paratantra. Although you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are completely independent, and you are dependent on the love and affection of your devotees. That is your nature. So the Lord is completely independent, but still Lord is dependent on the love and affection of his devotee. That is by his own nature. That's the Lord's nature. Verse 30. Nityananda kahe aiche haya kaun jana ye tumhare kahe kar raja darshana. Nityananda Prabhu then said, Who is there in the three worlds who can ask you to see the king? Verse 31. Kintu anuragi lokera swabhava ek haya ishta na paile nij prana se chhadya. Still, isn't it the nature of an attached man to give up his life if it does not attain his desired object? Verse 32. Yajnika brahmani sab tahate pramana Krishna lagi pati age chadi leka pran. For instance, some of the wives of the Brahmins who were performing sacrifices gave up their lives in the presence of their husbands for the sake of Krishna. Purport. This refers to the day of Lord Krishna and his cowherd boys and flocks of animals were present in the pasturing ground near Mathura. At that time, the cowherd boy, being a little hungry, requested food, and Lord Krishna asked him to go to the Brahmanas who were engaged nearby in performing the yajna or sacrifice and to get some food from that yajna. Being so ordered by the Lord, all the cowherd boys went to the Brahmanas and asked them for food, but they were denied. After this, the cowherd boys begged food from the wives of the Brahmanas. All these wives were very much devoted to Lord Krishna in spontaneous love, and as soon as they heard the request of the cowherd boys and understood that Krishna wanted some food, they immediately left the place of sacrifice. They were very much chastised for this by their husbands, and they were ready to give up their lives. It is the nature of a pure devotee to sacrifice his life for the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Verse 33. Eka yukti ache yadi kara avadhan, tumina mili leha tanre rahe tanra pran. Nityananda Prabhu then submitted one suggestion for the Lord's consideration. There is a way, he suggested, by which you need not meet the king, but which would enable the king to continue living. Verse 34. Eka bahirvas yadi deha kripakari tatha taha pana prana rakhe tomar asha dhari. If you, out of your mercy, send one of your outer garments to the king would live, hoping to see you sometime in the future. Purport. Sri Nityananda Prabhu was thus very tactfully suggesting that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave a piece of his old clothing to the king. Even though the king was not to meet the Lord, the king would then be pacified by receiving such a cloth. The king was very anxious to see the Lord, yet it was not possible for the Lord to see him. Just to resolve the situation, Nityananda Prabhu suggested that the Lord send an old piece of clothing. Thus the king would understand that the Lord was showing mercy to him. The king would then not do anything drastic like giving up his life or becoming a mendicant. Verse 35, Prabhu kahe tumi sab parama vidwan ye bhal haya se kare samadhan. The Lord said, since you are all very learned personalities, whatever you decide I shall accept. Verse number 36, Tabe Nityananda Gosani Govindera Pasha Magiya Laila Prabhura Ek Bahirvas. Lord Nityananda Prabhu then obtained an external garment used by the Lord by requesting it from Govinda. Verse 37, Se Bahirvas Sarvabhauma Pash Dila Sarvabhauma Se Vastra Rajare Patha La. Thus Nityananda Prabhu delivered the old cloth into the care of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya sent it to the king. Verse 38, Vastrapana Rajar Haila Anandita Mana Prabhu Rupa Kari Kare Vastrera Pujana. When the king received the old cloth, he began to worship it exactly as he would worship the Lord personally. Purport: this is also the conclusion of the Vedic injunction. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the absolute truth, everything in relation to him is on the same platform. The king had great affection for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and although he did not see the Lord, he had nonetheless already attained the conclusion of devotional service. Immediately upon receiving the cloth from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, the king began to worship it, accepting it as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord's clothing, bedding, slippers, and everything required as an ordinary necessity are all transformations of Shesha. Vishnu, the expansion of Sri Baldev, thus the cloth and the other paraphernalia of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are but other forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything connected to the Lord is worshipable. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs us that just as Krishna is worshipable, Krishna's place, Vrindavan, is also worshipable, and as Vrindavan is worshipable, similarly the paraphernalia in Vrindavan, the trees, roads, river, everything is worshipable. A pure devotee thus sings, Jai Jai Vrindavan Vasi Yata Jana, all glories to the residents of Vrindavan. If a devotee has a staunch devotional attitude, all these conclusions will be awakened or revealed within the heart. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau tasyaite kathita hi arthaha prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically relieved. This is from the Shvetashvara Avatar Upanishad 6.23. Thus, the following in the footsteps of Maharaj Prataprudra and other devotees, we should learn to worship everything belonging to Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is referred to by Lord Shiva as Tadiyanam. In Padma Puran it is said, Aradhana nam sarvesham Vishnur aradhananam param tasmat parataram devi tadiyanam samarchanam. O Devi, the most exalted system of worship is the worship of Lord Vishnu. Greater than that is the worship of Tadiya, or anything belonging to Vishnu. Shri Vishnu is Sachidananda Vigraha. Similarly, the most confidential servant of Krishna, the spiritual master, and all devotees of Vishnu are Tadiya. The Sachidananda Vigraha, Guru, Vaishnavas, and things used by them must be considered Tadiya, and without a doubt worshipable by all living beings. Verse 39, Ramananda Rai Yabe Dakshina Haite Aila Prabhu Sange Rahite Rajake Nivedila. After returning from the service in South India, Ramananda Rai requested the king to allow him to remain with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Verse 40, Tabe Raj Santoshe Tanhare Ajna Dila Apni Milana Lagi Sadhite Lagila. When Ramananda Rai requested the king to allow him to stay with the Lord, the king immediately gave him permission with great satisfaction. As for the king himself, he began to solicit Ramananda Rai to make a meeting arrangement. Verse 41, Mahaprabhu Mahakripa Karena Tumare More Milibare Avashya Sadhibe Tanhare. The king told Ramananda Rai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very, very merciful to you. Therefore, please solicit my meeting with him without fail. Verse 42. Ekasange dui jana kshetre yabe aila Ramananda Rai tabe prabhure milila. The king and Ramananda Rai returned together to Jagannath Kshetra, that is Puri, and Sri Ramananda Rai met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Verse 43. Prabhu pade prema bhakti janaila rajara prasanga pana aiche kahe bar bar. At that time, Ramananda Rai informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu about the ecstatic love of the king. Indeed, as soon as there was some opportunity, he repeatedly informed the Lord about the king. Verse 44. Rajamantri Ramananda Vyavahare Nipuna Rajapriti Kahi Dravaila Prabhura Mana. Sri Ramananda Rai was indeed a diplomatic minister for the king. His general behavior was very expert, and simply by describing the king's love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gradually softened the Lord's mind. Purport: a diplomat in the material world knows how to deal with people, especially in political affairs. Some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Ramananda Rai, Raghunath Das Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, and Rupa Goswami, were government officers and had a background of very opulent householder life. Consequently, they knew how to deal with people. In many instances, we have seen the diplomacy of Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Ramananda Rai employed in the service of the Lord. When Raghunath Das Goswami's father and uncle were to be arrested by government officials, Raghunath Das Goswami hid them and personally met the government officers and settled the affair diplomatically. This is but one instance. Similarly, Sanatan Goswami, after resigning his ministership, was thrown in the jail, and he bribed the attendant of the jail so he could leave the clutches of the Nawab and live with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now we see Ramananda Rai, a most confidential devotee of the Lord, diplomatically soften the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, despite the fact that the Lord definitely decided not to meet the king. The diplomacy of Ramananda Rai and entreaties of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and all other great devotees succeeded. The conclusion is that diplomacy used for the service of the Lord is a form of devotional service. Verse 45. Utkanthate Prataparudra Nare Rahibare Ramananda Sadhilena Prabhure Milibare. Maharaj Prataparudra, in great anxiety, could not endure not seeing the Lord. Therefore, Sri Ramananda Rai, by his diplomacy, arranged a meeting with the Lord for the king. Verse 46. Ramananda Prabhu Paya Kaila Nivedan Ek Bar Prataparudrere Dekhaha Charana. Sri Ramananda Rai frankly requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, please show your lotus feet to the king at least once. Verse 47. Prabhu kahe Ramananda kahe vicharya raja ke milite yuyaye sannyasi hana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, my dear Ramananda, you should make this request after duly considering whether it is befitting for a sannyasi to meet a king. Verse 48. Rajare milane bhikshu kera dui lok nash paraloka rahu loke kare upahas. If a mendicant meets the king, this world and the next world are both destroyed for the mendicant. Indeed, what is there to say of the next world? In this world, people will joke if a sannyasi meets a king. Verse 49. Ramananda kahe tumi Ishwara Swatantra kare tumar bhaye tumi naha paratantra. Ramananda replied, my Lord, you are the supreme personality, independent personality. You have nothing to fear from anyone because you are not dependent on anyone. Verse 50. Prabhu kahe ami manushya ashrame sannyasi kaya mano vakye vyavahare bhaya vasi. When Ramananda addressed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a supreme personality of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu objected, saying, I am not the supreme personality of Godhead but an ordinary human being. Therefore, I must fear public opinion in three ways: with my body, mind, and words. Verse 51. Shukla vastre masi bindu yaiche na lukaya sannyasira alpa chidra sarvaloke gaya. As soon as the general public finds a little fault in the behavior of a sannyasi, they advertise it like wildfire. A black spot of ink cannot be hidden on a white cloth. it is always very prominent. Verse 52. Rai kahe keta papira kariyacha avayahati, Ishwar sevak tomar bhakt gajapati. Ramananda Rai replied, "My dear Lord, you have delivered so many sinful people. This King Prataprudra, the king of Odisha, is actually a servitor of the Lord and your devotee." Verse 53. Prabhu kahe purna yaiche dugdhera khalsa, Sura bindu pate keha na kare parasha. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then said, there may be much milk in a big pot, but if it is contaminated by a drop of liquor, it is untouchable. Verse 54. Yadyapi Prataprudra sarva gunavan tanhare malin kaila eka raja nam. The king certainly possesses all good qualities, but simply by taking up the name king, he has infected everything. Verse 55. Tathapi tomar yati maha grahahaya tabe ani milaha tumi tanhar tanaya. But if you are still very eager for the king to meet with me, please first bring his son to meet me. Verse 56. Atma vae jayate putraha ei shastravani putrera milane yena milibe apani. It is indicated in the revealed scriptures that the son represents the father. Therefore, the son's meeting with me would be just as good as the king's meeting with me. Purport in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.78.36, it is said, Atma vai putra utpanna iti Veda anushasanam. The Vedas enjoin that one is born as his own son. The son is non-different from the father, and this is admitted in every revealed scripture. In Christian theology, it is believed that Christ, the Son of the God, is also God, or in other words, that they are identical. Verse 57. Tabe rai yae sab rajare kahila, prabhura ajnaye tandra putra lena aila. Ramananda Rai then went to inform the king about his talks with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and following the Lord's orders brought the king's son to see him. Verse 58. Sundar Rajar Putra Shamal Varana Kishora Vayasa Dirgha Kamal Nayana. The prince, just entering upon his youth, was very beautiful. He was blackish in complexion and had large lotus eyes. Verse 59. Pitambar Dhare Ange Ratna Abharana Shri Krishna Smarane Tenha Haila Udipana. The prince was dressed in yellow cloth and there were jeweled ornaments decorating his body. Therefore, anyone who saw him would remember Lord Krishna. Verse number 60. Tanre deki Mahaprabhura Krishna Smriti Haila Prema Veshe Tanre Mili Kahite Lagila. Seeing the boy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately remembered Krishna. Meeting the boy in ecstatic love, the Lord began to speak. Verse 61. E Mahabhagavata Yanhara Darshane Vrajendra Nandan Smriti Haya Sarvajane. Here is a great devotee, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Upon seeing him, everyone can remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, son of Maharaj Nanda. Purport. In his Anubhashya, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that a materialist mistakenly accepts the body and mind as a source of material enjoyment. In other words, a materialist accepts the bodily conception of life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not regard the son of Maharaj Prataprudra with the idea that he was a materialist, being the son of a materialist, nor did he consider himself the enjoyer. Mayavadi philosophers make a great mistake by assuming that the Sachidanand Vigraha, the transcendental form of the Lord, is like a material body. However, there is no material contamination in transcendence, nor is there any possibility of imagining spirituality in matter. One cannot accept matter as spirit, as indicated by the technical words bhauma, ijya, dhihe. This is from Bhagavatam 10.84.13. Materialistics, Mayavadis, imagine the form of God in matter, although according to their imagination, God is ultimately formless. This is simply mental speculation. Even though Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, He placed himself in the position of a gopi. He also accepted the king's son directly as a son of Maharaj Nanda, Brajendra Nandan Hari. This is perfect vision according to the direction of the Vedic culture as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, Panditaha Samadarshina. Such acceptance of the absolute truth according to Vaishnava philosophy is explained in both the Guṇḍicā Upanishad 3.2.3 and Katha Upanishad 1.2.23 in the following words. Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Nam Medhaya Na Bahuna Shrutena Yam Evesha Vrinute Tena Labhyas Tasyesha Atma Vivrunute Tanum Swam. The Supreme Lord is not obtained by expert explanations, by vast intelligence, or even by much hearing. He is obtained only by one whom he himself chooses. To such a person he manifests his own form. The living entity is entangled in material existence due to his lack of such spiritual vision. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung in his Kalyana Kalpataru, Samsare Asiya Prakriti Bhajiya Purusha Abhimane Mari. When the living entity comes to the material world, he thinks himself the enjoyer, thus he becomes more and more entangled. So the last verse for today, verse number 62. Kritartha ilan ami inhar darshane eta bali punaha tare kaila alingane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, I have become very much obligated just by seeing this boy. After saying this, the Lord again embraced the prince. So we'll continue our reading from verse 63 of the 12th chapter of Madhya Lila next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami ki jai. Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.